Sam Alito speaks on religious liberty, but he really needs to speak on proactive religious warfare. And until he does, I will. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is another Declaration of Truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. Mr. Justice Samuel A. Alito spoke at the Religious Liberty Summit at the Notre Dame School of Law. There, he took to task many foreign dignitaries who criticized his opinion of the court in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. But he spent more time criticizing those who want Christians to keep religion a strictly private affair. Now, to be sure, his comments were very valuable, but a call for a more militant Christianity that presses the issues of sin and crime about which only Christians seem to care seemed to be missing from his discourse. Not that he would disagree with it, but he failed to mention it. Encouraging Christians to use the opportunity Justice Alito and his colleagues have given us is a vitally important message. Before I get into that in detail, I do want to shout out to the sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views, link in the description. Be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of good merchandise there, including this t-shirt, which I don't believe you have seen before. It reads simply, organize. Get it? A lot of little fish can take down a big fish. And because the fish is the symbol of Christianity, that makes it all the more appropriate for today's subject. Now, I've left a link in the description to Justice Alito's speech at the Religious Liberty Summit. And yes, I'm going to put it into the end screen. Additional reportage comes from BizPac Review and the Daily Wire. BizPac Review has another article talking about the criticism of the Dobbs decision by the Duke of Sussex, whom you might remember as Prince Harry, except that he technically isn't a prince of the Royal House of Windsor anymore. But that's neither here nor there. The remarks by Justice Alito that get all the attention were his pushback against foreign critics of his Dobbs opinion. I quote, "Now, when I was putting these remarks together, I was tempted at this point to provide some examples. I am not a diplomat. I wouldn't be very bad about it, but it was unusual for me. This sort of diplomatic impulse came upon me, and I said to myself, you're an American judge. What business is it of yours to criticize decisions that are handed down by foreign courts?" Well, I've had some second thoughts over the last few weeks since I had the honor this Supreme Court term of writing the only Supreme Court decision in the history of that institution that has been lambasted by a whole string of foreign leaders who felt perfectly fine commenting on American law. Well, at this, his audience started to laugh, and he went on. One of these was former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, but he paid the price. Oh boy, ruffle! And he wasn't done. He said, post hoc ergo propter hoc, right? All right, stop right there. That's a fancy Latin phrase, a typical law school phrase, and it means it happened after this, therefore you could say that this caused it. After that particular Latin quip, Alito went on, but others are still in office. French President Emmanuel Macron, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, I believe, are two. But what really wounded me was when the Duke of Sussex addressed the United Nations and seemed to compare the decision whose name may not be spoken with the Russian attack on Ukraine. Excuse me. I have a link in the description to a tweet containing video of the Duke of Sussex calling Dobbs part of a global assault on democracy and freedom. Now, play it for yourselves, then decide whether Justice Alito was right or wrong. But then he said something infinitely more valuable. Quote, well, despite this temptation, I'm not going to talk about cases from other countries. All I'm going to say is that ultimately, if we're going to win the battle to protect religious freedom in an increasingly secular society, we will need more than positive law. Unquote, Sam Alito. Now, there's another phrase for you. Positive what? Positive law is the law that legislatures pass and to which executives give assent. Natural law is the law that proceeds from human nature, or the law that comes from God. But even before that part of the speech, Justice Alito said this, that I think rates more attention. No constitution or international agreement provides unqualified protection for religious liberty, nor should it. And he gave the obvious example of a religion people should not be free to exercise, and that would be the child sacrifice cult of Moloch. Then he mentioned the limits on religious liberty by the European Commission on Human Rights. Article 9, quote, freedom to manifest one's religion or beliefs should be subject only to such limitations as are prescribed by law and are necessary in a democratic society in the interests of public safety, for the protection of public order, health, or morals, or for the protection of the rights and freedoms of others. Pretty high-minded stuff, as even Alito agrees. But see whether you picked up on this that he picked up on. Quote, what sort of judge cannot take a limitation like that and shrink religious liberty as much as that judge wants? And if that judge does not highly esteem religious liberty, he can shrink it all the way down to what people often talk about today, and that is freedom of worship. Freedom of worship means freedom to do these things you like to do in the privacy of your home or your church or your synagogue or your mosque or temple. But when you step outside to the public square in the light of day, you'd better behave yourself like a good secular citizen. And that is the problem Christians face today, and have faced since James G. Blaine promoted his amendments to state constitutions. Before I get deeper into what Christians, especially in America, need to do, I want to shout out to another sponsor, BitNext. This is your replacement for Zoom, Slack, the Google G Suite, Microsoft Office 365, Dropbox, WeTransfer, and Chili Piper, among others. Unlike any of them, BitNext protects your content and conversations so well, even the administrators can't see it. So this is your channel for secure comms, conferencing, cloud storage, and file sharing. Best of all, everything is back-end. You don't even need client software. If you have a browser, you can use BitNext. Follow the link and give them a try. 28 days free of charge. You can't beat that with a stick. All right, now let's get down to brass tacks, shall we, on this matter of freedom of worship. You want to know something? Franklin Delano Roosevelt mentioned freedom of worship and freedom of speech as two of his 4 freedoms. And I wouldn't rate him as a champion of freedom. Why not? Because look at the other 2 freedoms he named. Freedom from want and freedom from fear. Now understand this. Freedom from is not freedom at all. It pretends to be a guarantee of safety. Nothing more. In that context, freedom of worship becomes a very weak freedom indeed. Christians in America especially have forgotten that the founders did found America as a Christian nation. They assumed that a Christian nation was a legitimate default state. Now let's remember what John Adams said about passions unbridled by morality and religion. Quote, avarice, ambition, revenge, or gallantry would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Unquote, John Adams. And then James G. Blaine came with the Catholics. But As Father Niemöller might have said, other Christians were not Catholics, so they didn't speak up. And then Blaine's successors came from the non-Catholic Christians. And now there isn't anyone else to speak up. Except now, Justice Alito and his colleague Justice Clarence Thomas have given us 3 new precedents. Together, they present an opportunity Christians dare not squander. They are, in reverse order of decision, but forward order of importance. Kennedy versus Bremerton School District, 21-418. Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, 19-1392. And Carson versus Macon, docket number 20-1088. Fellow Christians, I want to make sure you understand what a great opportunity we have. If you want to grasp that, check out this story from the second book of the Kings, chapters 6 and 7. Jehoram, king of the northern kingdom, faced a deadly crisis. The Arameans, or ancient Syrians, had laid siege to his capital city of Samaria. Food prices were out of sight and typically bought food anyone would consider unclean. Don't ask! And some resorted to cannibalism. The prophet Elisha, successor to Elijah, predicted an end to the famine. Furthermore, he said it would happen one day after he spoke. Now, 4 lepers happened to be scavenging at the entrance to the main gate. Yes, I said lepers. Hansen's disease was quite common in that part of the world in those days, and they didn't have dapsone, which is how we treat it today. Well, these 4 lepers decided that they could stay where they were and starve, or enter the city and starve, or they could give themselves up to the Arameans. This they decided to do. But, excuse me, but when they approached the enemy camp, they found it deserted. God had sent a hallucination on the Arameans. So they, imagining they heard a combined Hittite and Egyptian force attacking their rear, fled in a total rout. These 4 outcasts walked into an intact camp, plundered the first 2 tents they saw, and relieved their hunger and thirst. And then they said to another, "Brothers, this is good news. We have to report this." And report it they did. They shouted it to the city gatekeepers, and they related to the king and his court. And King Joram at first didn't believe the report. He thought maybe the Arameans had left their camp and were bivvying in open country, ready to capture anyone who came out, then walk right through an unguarded gate. Then his staff urged him to send out a small recon party. What did he have to lose? And the recon party reported everything was as the lepers said it was. All believing Christians should take the lesson from that. Doubt causes you to miss opportunities. In this case, those 3 Supreme Court presidents are the equivalent of the Arameans fleeing their siege camp. So we mustn't wait for the modern Arameans to realize that they've been had. Press the advantage. Don't even give them a chance to compare notes. Justice Alito was right. We need more than positive law to secure this victory. Christians must press for a due respect for natural law. According to Jefferson, natural law recognizes the rights to life, liberty, and property. Other countries, especially Western countries, sad to say, don't respect that today. This should surprise no one. Christians have retreated to a freedom of worship position, and now they will surely lose that too, unless we turn and attack those who question the validity not only of Christianity, but of the natural rights of human beings. And that means all human beings, including the unborn. Link in the description of the article, to Sam Alito's speech, to the Duke of Sussex silly complaint, and to conservative news and views. I have another link to the awesome online store and to BitNext, as I also mentioned. And if you like what you've heard, you can like this video. And on the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link, also a link to the video of Sam Alito speaking at the Religious Liberty Summit, and to my Christian Governance playlist. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.